Hello boys and girls, today Auntie Katie is going to read Mr. Skinny by Roger Hargreaves. Auntie Katie bought herself a new coat and so she's going to read Mr. Skinny with her new coat on. I hope you like it. Mr. Skinny by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Skinny was extraordinarily thin, painfully thin. If you turned sideways, you could hardly see him at all. And what made it even worse was that he lived in a place called Fatland. Yes, Fatland. There's Mr. Skinny. He's down on the side. You can hardly see him at all. He's so skinny. As you can very well imagine, everything and everybody in Fatland was as fat as could be. Not stout, fat. Fatland dogs were extremely fat. Look at the fat dog. He really is a pudding pie, isn't he? Fatland worms were extraordinarily fat. Wowzers, look at the fat worm. Fatland birds were exceedingly fat. There we go. Fat bird. And you should see a Fatland elephant. Whew! That really is a fat elephant, isn't it? And there, in the middle of all this fatness, lived Mr. Skinny, in the thinnest house you've ever seen. Poor Mr. Skinny, he didn't like being so different from everything and everybody, but there wasn't very much he could do about it. You see, he had hardly any appetite at all. A Mr. Skinny meal was a very meagre affair. There's Mr. Skinny's skinny house. Let's see what he has to eat. Do you know what he had for breakfast? 1 cornflake. And for lunch, 1 baked bean. And for tea, nothing. And for supper, the world's smallest sausage. Oh, there's Mr. Skinny having the world's smallest sausage. After that, he felt so full, he went straight to bed, in his long, thin bed, in his long, thin bedroom, in his long, thin house in Fatland. Oh, I do wish I could do something about my appetite, he sighed to himself just before he went to sleep. I think, he thought, that I had better go and see the doctor about it. And he went to sleep. There he is in his long skinny bed, in his long skinny bedroom, in his long skinny house. The following morning was lovely. A large fat sun shone down on the fat green trees and the fat yellow flowers, and through them walked Mr. Skinny on his way to see the doctor. There's the fat tree, and there's the fat flowers, and there's the fat sun. Oh my God, everything is fat in Fatland. Poor Mr. Skinny. Dr. Plump, come in, he wheezed as Mr. Skinny knocked on his door. Sit down, he wheezed as Mr. Skinny entered. And what, he wheezed, putting his plump fingers together, seems to be the trouble? There's Dr. Plump, putting his fingers together, asking Mr. Skinny what the trouble is. It's my appetite, explained Mr. Skinny. I'd like to be able to eat more so that I could put on a little weight. Yes, you are rather, how should I put this? Thin, wheezed the doctor, looking at him over his glasses. I know, he continued. Let's start the treatment right now. He licked his lips. This very moment, he added. And he opened a drawer in his desk and took out an enormous cream cake. He put it on the desk in front of him and opened another drawer and took out 6 donuts and put them on the desk in front of him, and opened another drawer and took out 12 currant buns and put them on the desk in front of him. 11sies, he explained. But it's only 10 o'clock, said Mr. Skinny. Who's counting? wheezed Dr. Plump. There is Dr. Plump licking his lips. I like all the stuff that they're about to eat too. Shouldn't have it too often now. And without further ado, he and Mr. Skinny ate the lot. Mr. Skinny ate a dab of cream, a donut crumb, and 1 carrot. Dr. Plum ate the rest. Gosh. Wheezed Dr. Plump, popping the last carrot bun into his mouth and looking at Mr. Skinny. I see what you mean about your appetite. He thought for a moment. Only one thing for it, he wheezed. This calls for drastic measures. And he picked up his telephone in his podgy fingers and dialed a number. I wonder who he's calling. 100 miles away, the telephone rang. Pring, 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 pring. Hello? Said a voice. Do you know whose voice it was? Mr. Greedy speaking, said the voice. Mr. Greedy listened to what the Dr. Plump had to say. You'd like Mr. Skinny to come to stay, he said. To build up his appetite, he added. Delighted, he agreed. There's Mr. Greedy, agreeing to stay with Mr. Skinny. And so Mr. Skinny went to stay with Mr. Greedy. He stayed for a month. And during that time, Mr. Greedy did manage to increase Mr. Skinny's appetite. And so, at the end of the month, Mr. Skinny returned home happy. There's Mr. Skinny. There's Mr. Greedy. They're saying goodbye to each other. Mr. Skinny had a tummy. A tummy was something Mr. Skinny had always wanted. I never knew I had it in me, he chuckled to himself. He was feeling so proud of his tummy, he decided to call in and see Dr. Plump on his way home. There's his little tummy. I say, wheezed Dr. Plump, looking him up and down. Congratulations. I tell you what, he went on, this calls for a celebration. And he opened his desk drawer. Mr. Skinny by Roger Hargreaves.